Have you ever wondered about that mysterious three-digit number that seems to control your financial life? That's right, I'm talking about your credit score. Where did it even come from? It feels like it's been around forever. But its history is actually more recent and fascinating than you might think. Let's rewind the clock and uncover the story of the credit score. Our story begins in the 19th century. Picture this: small towns, local shopkeepers, and a world without credit cards. Back then, if you needed to buy something on credit, you'd go to the local merchant. Your credit worthiness was based on your reputation. The shopkeeper knew you, your family, your job, and whether you were a person of your word. It was all about personal relationships and trust. Lenders kept handwritten ledgers, noting who paid on time and who was a bit slow. This was the original, very personal credit reporting system. As America grew and people started moving from small towns to big cities, this system began to break down. You can just walk into a store in a new city and expect the owner to know you. This created a problem for both lenders and borrowers. Lenders needed a way to gauge the risk of giving credit to strangers, and honest people needed a way to prove they were reliable. This need gave rise to the first credit reporting agencies. In the late 1800s, companies like the Retail Credit Company, which would later become Equifax, started popping up. These early agencies were more like private investigators than the data companies we know today. They would send agents called inspectors to interview your neighbors, your boss, and even your friends. They'd ask all sorts of personal questions. Do they pay their bills? What's their character like? What's their marital status? Do they drink too much? The reports they compiled were incredibly detailed and, frankly, super invasive by today's standards. They contained gossip, rumors, and subjective opinions about a person's lifestyle, politics, and social standing. It wasn't just about finance, it was a full-on character assessment for decades. This was the norm if you were denied credit. You often had no idea why. You couldn't see your own credit report. And there was no way to correct any errors or challenge unfair information. Imagine being denied a loan because your neighbor told an inspector they didn't like your new haircut. It sounds crazy, but this lack of transparency and fairness was a real problem for millions of people. This system was not only subjective, but also rife with bias, often discriminating against women, minorities, and people from certain neighborhoods. The tide began to turn in the mid-20th century. With the post-war economic boom, consumer credit exploded. More people were buying cars, appliances, and homes on credit. The old investigative method of credit reporting was just too slow and inefficient to keep up with the demand. Lenders needed a faster, more standardized way to make decisions. This is where a brilliant engineer and a mathematician enter our story. In 1956, Bill Fair and Earl Isaac founded a company called Fair, Isaac and Company, which we now know as FICO. They had a revolutionary idea. What if you could use statistical models to predict a borrower's likelihood of repaying a loan? They believed that by analyzing past borrowing behavior, they could create an objective, numerical score to represent a person's credit risk. They spent years collecting and analyzing data from various lenders. Their goal was to find patterns and identify the key behaviors that correlated with on-time payments versus defaults. They looked at things like payment history, the amount of debt carried, the length of credit history, and the types of credit used. This was a massive shift from judging someone's character to analyzing their financial data. It was about what you did, not who you were. Even with this innovation, the FICO score wasn't an overnight sensation. For the first few decades, it was mainly used by lenders as an internal tool. The public still had very little knowledge of its existence at the same time. Public frustration with the secretive and often unfair practices of credit bureaus was reaching a boiling point. People were tired of being denied opportunities based on inaccurate or biased information they couldn't even see. This public outcry led to a landmark piece of legislation, the Fair Credit Reporting Act of 1970. This was a game changer. For the first time, the law gave consumers the right to know what was in their credit reports. It required credit bureaus to provide a copy of the report upon request and established a process for disputing and correcting errors. It was a huge step towards transparency and fairness in the credit industry. The law also placed limits on what kind of information could be collected and for how long negative information could stay on your report. The days of permanent black marks from decades-old gossip were over, with these new regulations in. The stage was set for the FICO score to go mainstream. In the 1980s, the three major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, started licensing the FICO scoring model and making the scores available to lenders across the country, and in 1989. The FICO score as we know it today was officially introduced. It provided a quick, consistent, and standardized way for lenders to evaluate millions of credit applications. It made the lending process faster, more efficient, and in many ways fairer by removing much of the human bias that had plagued the old system. Suddenly, this three-digit number became incredibly powerful. It started influencing not just who got a loan, but also the interest rates they would pay. A high FICO score could save you thousands of dollars over the life of a mortgage or car loan. A low score could mean paying higher rates or being denied credit altogether. Over the years, the FICO model has been updated and refined multiple times to improve its predictive accuracy. And other scoring models, like the Vantage score, have also emerged. Created as a joint venture by the three major credit bureaus to compete with FICO. So from a handshake and a name and a ledger to a complex algorithm analyzing billions of data points, the evolution of the credit score tells a fascinating story about technology, society, and the very nature of trust. It's a system born out of necessity, shaped by innovation, and reformed by the fight for fairness and transparency. Understanding this history helps us see that our credit score isn't just a random number. It's the modern-day version of our financial reputation, built one payment at a time. It's a powerful tool, and now you know exactly where it came from. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this history lesson interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the things that shape our world. See you in the next video.